Today we are going to continue on chapter 19. And I want to say good afternoon to everybody here. So this is our cover page, and the title is Untangle Our Knots, Simplify Our Life. This one is a title I think that fits very much to our content today. And I hope that after our session today, we will all learn something and make our life more easy and more simplified. We can see that in this chapter, there is the chapter title. It's called Fan Pu Zhang. Fan, the first word is return. It's return to where we come from. So return to where we come from. So we come from a place that we call heaven, or you can call the universe, the source, the Tao, the universe where God and Bodhisattva reside. You can call whatever name you want to call it, but it's definitely not here. But the point is that the place that we live on earth, this is not our home. We are just here temporary. Imagine this is a recreation trip that we come out on earth. And after a period of time, we are going to return. It's going to be a place where we return to where we come from. So we were there before. So in order to return, we have to find the right path. So finding the right path is we have to come to a realization that we are here lost. A lot of people are still lost, and they think that this earth is their home, which is not. We all know that this is not our permanent home. Eventually, we have to go back to where we come from. The other perspective that I want you to think about is to reflect upon ourselves. When we talk to somebody or when we deal with people in our environment, a lot of time we have to reflect on ourselves. Return to home is one thing, but reflecting on ourselves is another layer of definition of this word. So being able to reflect others onto our true self, like using others as a mirror so that we can reflect upon ourselves, observe ourselves, ABC ourselves. ABC means to accuse, blame. C means complaint. A lot of time we tend to accuse people, blame on other people, and complain about other people. For us to return home, a lot of time we have to look upon ourselves. We have to carefully examine ourselves. And that's what I call ABC yourself. We constantly have to look for our mistake, accuse ourselves, blame ourselves, not to do that to other people, but we need to do that to ourselves. What have I done wrong, instead of pointing finger to others? The other word for the title is Pu. You can see this picture here. So Pu is the lumber that is being recently felled, or it's being cut down, and it's just sitting there. It has not been carved. It has not been processed. And it does not have any artificial decoration. So this means the state of origin. Laozi used a lot of analogy to express his teaching so that we can understand what he meant by Tao. So this is, in this chapter, Laozi used Pu, which is this, to tell us the Tao. In the previous chapter, Laozi used the wheel, 30 spokes connect to one hub, use the cup, and use the water so that we can resonate with our Tao. And in this chapter, Laozi used the word unprocessed lumber. And this word, when we take it to ourselves, it means being honest, being straightforward, sincere, pure nature, simple, plain, and original. So from this process of lumber, the next stage is that somebody's going to cut it down, and then it's going to make the lumber to different furniture, to different utensils that we use, such as desk, such as wood bucket. In the previous time, people use wood bucket to take a shower. And they use a wooden bowl to eat. And of course, we know the shelf, bench, chair, doors. So all this, they all come from the lumber. all these things, they all contain the essence of lumber. Everything comes from lumber, right? So same thing for our Tao, our inner nature. Keep in mind that this unprocessed lumber is what Laozi used as an analogy for Tao. So for Tao, what we can manifest is and that is virtue, compassion, humbleness, and honesty, all this great virtue. So you can see that this virtue here, it all comes from Tao. And then you can see that all this furniture, all this utensil that we use come from Pu. So in this chapter, Laozi wants us to, in order to untangle ourselves, we have to return to our true nature. So in order to return to our true nature, one chapter that I can think about is that in the recent chapter, chapter 16, it talks about how the crops have to return to the original shape. So let me read it to you line by line. Listen carefully. All the living being must return to the root. Return to the root is called stillness. Stillness is called returning to one's source. So this verse tells us that everything have to return to its source, have to return to its stillness. Just like the life cycle of the rice crop. It doesn't matter what crop. It can be a corn or wheat. So you can see the crop, it grows from this seed. And then in the mature stage, it's the one right here. And when it's mature, it's going to produce the same seed as the original one. So this is called returning to the nature. So what happens if the farmer decides to harvest the crop in the middle? Then the crop will be wasted because the seed has not been produced, right? If the seed has not been produced, then the life of the rice crop is being wasted. So looking upon ourselves, if this is our infancy, and this is the place that where we're supposed to take our last breath. And by the time when we take our last breath, we have not discovered our original true self, or we have not returned to our nature. What's going to happen to us? Here, the verse continue on. Returning to one's source is called the natural law. So we all have to know that this cycle is part of the natural law. Knowing the natural law is called clarity. It's called wisdom. Without knowing the natural law, one wastes the effort, which eventually will lead to destruction. What kind of destruction are we talking about? The destruction of having extra karma, wasting our life, wasting our time, wasting our effort here. Imagine one day when we die, and then we will all go through life review. In the Christian term, it's called the judgment. We heard this a lot. Somebody died and they see a flashback of their history from childhood until the moment that they die. And it goes very fast. But sometimes you will see a pause on the place where you make mistake. I think that on the YouTube, they come back to life and then they see their own movie. And this is what they recall. So this is what we need to go through, everybody. Imagine in that moment when we do our life review and we discover that we spend so much time not on cultivating our true self, not on cultivating our Tao, but we focus our life on wealth, on cars, on career, on something that's not permanent. Then that's what Laozi means. Eventually, it will lead to destruction. So what happened next? That means we have to come back to earth again to take our lesson. This is the content for chapter 19. So when we look at chapter 19, you can see that I separate into two parts. This part is the body. This part is the conclusion. The last two lines is the most important line. So let's look at the top one. When you look at the top one, so there's three sentences, 1, 2, 3. Laozi remind us that in order to cultivate, we have to fulfill these three items. So one thing I want to point out to you is that A lot of people, when they read Tao Te Ching, they cannot understand because Laozi's teaching is really nonsense. Nonsense is because Laozi talk about this continued sainthood. But isn't sainthood good? Laozi also talk about discard knowledge. So Laozi's teaching is very short. Because it's very short, people cannot understand. And that's why it's difficult to read Tao Te Ching. It's really difficult because a lot of time you have to read beneath the line and look at it from a different perspective. Laozi wants us to discontinue benevolence and discontinue the righteousness. When we look at some lines that really doesn't make sense, we have to look at in other perspectives. One example that I can give it to you is in chapter 5. Chapter 5 talks about heaven and earth are not humane. So this is not really what Laozi meant. Laozi meant heaven and earth are humane. They regard myriad of things as straw dog. The saints are humane. They regard the common as straw dogs. So looking at chapter 5 and chapter 19, you can see Laozi express the passage with the same attitude. He's being sarcastic or being ironic. In order to study this chapter 19, I want you to focus on these two words. It's this word here, discontinue and discard, where I highlighted in yellow. I want to talk about these two words because it's being repeated 3 times. So this word here, the first one, it means to discontinue, to cut off, to break off. It means to cut off with knife. And this word, qi, it means discard, abandon, renounce, abstain, abandon by throwing away. So on the surface, it really look the same. They all have the similar meaning, and which is true. When I was looking at this chapter, I find that it's good to study the etymology. So here I want to share with you this text, jue. Jue, you can see that this picture here, there's a bundle of a thread being separate into 2 piles. So you can see knife, 3 knife right here is to discontinue the thread, is to cut off. And you can see this picture here. And I also find other image from other site. So you can see the thread is being cut off. And in the later time, people separate the thread into 2 different trays. So this one is the meaning of the thread is being cut off and being put in a different place. And here is the etymology for this text. So we often say that on top of this character, there is a piece of knife. So do you see the knife here? So this knife is on top of this text. This knife, the symbol of this knife later on becomes to this text. So when you combine these two together, it means this text, which means to eradicate, to cut off, to break it off, to abstain. And this is another one. And I find this one very interesting that I want to share with you because in the very ancient time, they have this text here. And I was looking at this. It doesn't really tell me anything, but when I research further, this means hands. So you can see one hand right here and then the other hand on the other side. And then this symbol, it means the bamboo woven tray that in the old time, the farmer used to use this tray to do farming. And unfortunately, in this case, this tray is used to abandon a baby or a toddler. It's a very sad word because this word is talking about 2 hands carrying the tray, and this tray has the infant or toddler or a baby inside. Because in the old times in China, there was a lot of famine, wars, a lot of fighting going on. So sometimes the regular citizens or the common people, they don't have the ability to raise a child, or sometimes the baby gets sick. They don't have the resource to seek the doctor. So what can they do? The parents, the only thing that they can do is to abandon the infant. Therefore, this word, it means to abandon. So it's a possession that somebody already has, but then want to abandon this possession. So it means renounce, abandon, discard, and abstain. So when we look at these two texts together, the first one, it means to cut off with knife. And the second one, it means to abandon by throwing away, like throwing away the baby or throwing away whatever belonging we have. Now let's look at the other meaning on this text. This text here, 觉, it has the meaning of prevention of rising thought. Before the thought rise, we have to prevent it comes about. It takes cultivation. Qi, this word qi, it's something that we already have. So it's a thought that we already have, but we want to abandon it. So I find that these two words, it's really relevant to our cultivation. In our mind, we have a lot of emotional luggage that we have to get rid of. We have to throw away. We already have this emotional luggage. It does take some time for us to clean up our luggage, to clean up our trash. How much emotional luggage we have. We have a lot of grudges. Sometimes we have childhood bad memory we want to get rid of. So it might be necessary to find ways to get rid of them. Sometimes if the symptom is severe, we do want to see therapists or psychologists. Sometimes we have to go see a hypnosis expert. Some people, they use different ways to get rid of their emotional luggage. So once we get rid of the emotional luggage, we also have to prevent it comes about. Prevention and treatment are very important in terms of our cultivation when we deal with our mind. Now let's go to the first verse. Discontinue sagehood and discard knowledge. People will benefit hundredfold. When it says people, I want you to refer to us. If we discontinue sagehood and discard knowledge, I will benefit hundredfold. So this is talking about me, talking about we as the cultivator. Now, when we interpret this line, we have to look at in the ancient time. I think it was 2,000 years ago, because this was Laozi's timing. 2,500 years ago, the sage or the saint or the scholar were considered very wise person. They have great quality, and they are much admired in the imperial time back then. And usually those people are being carefully selected through their national exam. Just like right now, we have like, in order to be a lawyer, we have to pass the bar exam. To be a CPA, we have to pass the CPA exam. And to be a doctor, there's different exams that you have to pass. Those sage, they have to pass those exams. So once they pass the exam, people look upon them. But just like chapter 2, Laozi talks about, when people recognize beauty as beauty, ugliness appear. And when people recognize good as good deed, evilness appear. So when people admire sage, there will be the corrupted sage want to take advantage of this title. Therefore, Laozi say we should discontinue admire them. So in the modern time, we don't call them sage. We call them politicians, because these are the congressmen, the elected official, the senator, the governor. We look upon them. They do have this authority. They do have wealth, and they do have this power. And we also look upon scientists, doctors, scholar, and lawyer, etc. But I'm not saying all the politicians are bad or all these are bad, but with the good one, there will be the bad one. There will be the bad one who take advantage of their reputation, their fame, their authority to abuse their power. Whatever things they say, sometimes it becomes a false knowledge from the doctor, from the politician. So we need to discontinue sagehood and discard knowledge. So here, the sagehood it does not reply to Buddha or Jesus, because they are the genuine sage, genuine Buddha, genuine saint. So when we look at this sentence, we can read it as, stop pursuing and imitating sages' fame and wealth, and discard fake knowledge. And when we do that, our essence will benefit 100-fold. So again, when we read Tao Te Ching, a lot of time the translator will translate the sentence as people. So when it's translated as people, I mean, I have to translate as a people too, because this is what it says, people. But when we read it as people, it seems like this line has nothing to do with me. So when we read Tao Te Ching, I want you to read it as I will benefit 100-fold. It will benefit us so that I become part of the teaching as if Laozi is teaching to me. So the next slide, I want to talk about the word saint. This saint is an interesting word because it's made out of 3 characters that you all can understand easily. So I want to bring this up. So this character on the upper left, it means ears. So this saint has the ability to hear things and hear the good things and be able to filter the false knowledge. And then on the right, on the upper right is the mouth. So the saint have the mouth to speak the good words and filter the bad words. In other words, the negative things does not come out from the saint. And then here probably is the most powerful one. This one, it means Wang, which means king. As you can see this etymology here. On the top, you can interpret that as a handle on the top. And in the bottom, you can see it's a very sharp weapon that can cut anything. So it signifies somebody who has control, has power, has authority to overcome difficult situation. If the situation is difficult, then this saint will just cut it off. So I don't want you to think about capital punishment because when we think about knife, we think about capital punishment. But I want you to think about the word that we mentioned about. This one, we can cut it off. So the saint have the ability, have the courage, have the bravery to cut off whatever he or she needs to cut off. And who are they? They are the saint, the sage, the king, the ancient emperors, the Buddha. In this chapter here, and how do we relate that to our life? We can relate that the saint as our politician, scientist, doctor, scholar, and lawyer. So let's look at a step further. The column on the left is the genuine column. The one on the right is the fake column. So this one is the example of the genuine sage. So what are the characteristics of the genuine sage? They usually don't want to be heard. They don't want to be publicized. They don't want to be recognized, and they behave from their consciousness, from their true self. And they will continue to do work regardless whether it's being documented or admired by other people. And here on the right is the fake one, because they want to imitate the genuine sage. They want to have the same opportunity being admired by other people. So they use different tactics. As you can see, all this are the tactics that the fake sage use: bribery, threatening, intimidation, ransom, blackmail, allurement, corruption, and hush money. So you can see there's a difference between the genuine sage and the fake sage. So now we understand why Laozi wants us to discontinue the sagehood. So now here it's referred to Laozi's another perspective, discontinue the knowledge, because knowledge, there is the genuine knowledge, which is the genuine wisdom, and also the fake knowledge. All this on the left is the genuine wisdom or the genuine knowledge. The knowledge of the universal law, such as Tienshin Temple has on Thursday, hosted by Professor Sherry. She talks about different universal law, the law of karma. She hasn't get that yet. She hasn't get there yet, but I already gone there. I kind of look in the book from the Diana Cooper, because in the end, it talks about the law of reincarnation, the law of oneness, the law of karma, and there's different law. And also the reading from the sutra and literature from the ancient saints and sages, they have great knowledge. So the ability to accept this knowledge is, it takes a special person to do that, such as all this knowledge, maybe it's an experience that we haven't done there, but we have this ability, we have this faith to follow the teaching from the ancient saints and sages. Although some of them is inaudible, some of them is intangible, some of them is invisible, but we still follow them. So in order to follow this universal law and knowledge, it does take somebody who has this affinity. And the picture on the right is about knowledge perceived from our five senses, which is the fake knowledge, illusory knowledge, such as this ticket here. This one is what I downloaded from the website. It's a lottery commercial. It says on the left here, it says your dream at your fingertips. So when we look at the lottery commercial, it gives us a lot of promise. Just spend a couple of dollars, then you can fulfill your dream. This is fake knowledge. And also when we see the car commercial, sometimes you will see the car is cruising along, and then you see a beautiful girl, sexy. It's like if a man drives a car, this man will be able to attract sexy girl, or a man maybe standing in front of this car with a suit. So it looks like this is a successful businessman or a happy family, like the picture here. So does the car can bring us so much happiness? Can the car help us to find our loved one? Can the car help us to have a harmonious family? I'm sure we all know the answer, and the answer is no. So all these are fake knowledge. And also Christmas is coming. Sometimes the commercial will say that, oh, I'm sure you want to give this to your special loved one so that provide happiness to that person. Sure, we can provide happiness to that person, but it's only temporary. So a lot of time the commercial just give us false knowledge, especially in the Christmas time. We just have to watch out our wallet. Now let's look at the second verse. Discontinue benevolence and discard righteousness. People will recover filial piety and compassion. Here I want to talk about filial piety. Why does Laozi talk about filial piety and compassion? There's so many virtues. Why not say people will recover integrity or honesty, or what about sincerity? So Laozi talk about filial piety and compassion because this is the fundamental virtue in the family. Besides our individual, the next person around us most likely is our family member. And this family member is going to be our parent or our child. So this is the etymology for this word. This is filial piety. So you can see that this man is carrying his mother. So do you remember this picture here? This symbol here? Remember I said this is the baby? So this baby finally grew up. So this baby is standing in the bottom, carrying this older parent. So this word is an affection from children to parents. And this one is affection from parents to children. So you can see this picture here. This is the image of heart. And on the top, it means thread. It has two threads. So in Chinese, if you see a symbol more than two, that means it's multiple. So imagine you have a child and you are always connected to your child, not through a thread, but it's an invisible thread because you are constantly thinking about your child, constantly worry. Is he okay? Is she okay? So this thread is the invisible thread. So this is the affection from the mother worrying about the child. So these two virtues are important because this is the fundamental virtue within the family. On this verse, Laozi talk about benevolence and righteousness. So in this verse, Laozi's benevolence and righteousness is different than Confucius' definition of benevolence and righteousness. So Laozi talk about benevolence and righteousness, it's a step down from Tao. So it's a step down. It's not as genuine as Tao, but it's still related to Tao, like the second step down. But in Confucius teaching, benevolence is considered the highest virtue, and it's equivalent to Tao. So that's the difference between Laozi's definition and Confucius' definition. So in the following slide, I want to explain to you further on Laozi's definition of benevolence and righteousness. So in chapter 18, we talk about when the environment of great Tao decline, benevolence and righteousness appear. So in this chapter, Laozi talk about benevolence and righteousness. This is after Tao has declined, after the environment has declined. When the environment of great Tao decline, benevolence will still be there, but then there will be the genuine one and the fake one, because the genuine one does not speak any voice. The saint or the sage just do their own things without being admired, without being recognized, without any publicity. So a lot of time, this genuine will just go silent. And on the other hand, the fake one will speak very loud. So a lot of time, the fake one will dominate the genuine one. Same thing for the righteousness. The fake one will dominate the genuine one. So the genuine one is the true self. It's a reflection from the true self. And the reflection from the false self is fake. And we all know that the false self, it's like a speakerphone. It speaks very loud. And the true self, sometimes it just resonates on a vibrational sound. It goes in silence. So this really echoes with chapter 1. Chapter 1 says, the Tao that can be spoken is not an eternal Tao. So what's being spoken here? A lot of time, false self speaks so loud that everybody knows. Unfortunately, we are in a society that people speaking louder than they supposed to be. So it's important to distinguish which one on a person who behave from the true self and which one behave from the false self. And chapter 38 is the same thing too. When the Tao is lost, low virtue appear. So this low virtue, it means the fake virtue. And then when the virtue is lost, this one is the real virtue. So one is the fake virtue and this one is the genuine virtue. When the genuine virtue is lost, then the fake benevolence appear. And when the fake benevolence appear, then that means the genuine benevolence is lost, right? And then the fake righteousness comes. Genuine righteousness is lost. So as you can see, it's a very similar picture than this one here. And those who have propriety as disguise is the sign of the scales of royalty and trust. This is the beginning of chaos. As you can see, this is where we are now. Our society is already in this stage. Scammer from Amazon, from email, from phone call, from text. So as you can see, when the Tao is lost, low benevolence appear and low righteousness appear. So you can see that this is what Laozi is talking about. Discontinue the low benevolence, the fake benevolence, and discard the low righteousness and the fake righteousness. Say no to the fake one, the low one, and the non-genuine one. And it doesn't mean that the benevolence and the righteousness are not there. They are there. They just go silent. Next one, discontinue deception and discard self-interest. Robbers and thieves will not exist. This one is pretty easy to understand, self-explanatory. But I want to point out to you here, robber and thief. This, of course, we understand it's obtained in a wrongful way. But I want you to think about not something really tangible. Can we think about something that's intangible? In our life, having experienced the honesty being stolen or the friendship being stolen. Like two friends, they trust each other very much, but this friend betrayed this friend. The first friend stolen the second friend's trust and integrity. So robber and thief, it's not necessary in a tangible way. It can also be in an intangible way. So here, discontinue deception, of course, that means we need to practice honesty, sincerity, and live in a simple life. It means that we want to focus on our true self, less on our false self. Life is full of a challenge. We all know that, and we all experience that. It's not so much challenge as I want to travel around the world. Some people they have a big ambition. I want to travel around the world before I die. I want to taste all the goodies before I die. I want to do everything. I want to experience all the adventure, like the bungee jumping, scuba diving in the deep ocean, things like that. But those experience, those adventure, do they do really good to our true self? We have to think about that. Laozi wants us to focus more on the true self, less on our false self. Our false self has this characteristic of feeling deficient, lacking. The false self is like a huge hole that can never be filled. If I desire something, and once that desire is fulfilled, it will create another hole in that false self. That's why people or us, we spend our whole life to find happiness. Some people find happiness through drugs, alcohol, food, sex, cars, looking for their soulmate. But in the end, what do they find? The drug, it's only less temporary. The alcohol, it does certain damage to your body. And of course, it's only temporary too. The food, how much food can you eat? Once your tummy is full, but you are going to crave for another food in the next meal. And some young kids, they would like to go to watch a movie, hang out with friends. I know a guy who is very lonely and he is looking for a soulmate. I'm thinking this soulmate is made out of a person. How long would that last? I mean, the people who've been through marriage, we know that in marriage, there's ups and downs, ups and downs. Even in the relationship, there's ups and downs, ups and downs. So sometimes a relationship cannot satisfy ourselves. So all these are the characteristics of the perspective that false self give it to us. So all this false self perspective are an illusion. Laozi wants us to focus on true self, not just Laozi, Confucius, Shakyamuni Buddha, all the Zen sages told us to focus more on true self. Maybe they use a different term. Laozi used the term Tao. By the way, when I say true self, I mean Tao. So false self has this characteristic of feeling deficiency. It has a huge hole that waiting for us to fulfill. But this hole is infinite. If it's a hole that is measurable, that's fine. We just fill it up, then we are done. But this hole, it has no bottom. It's bottomless. So can we get rid of this false self? If this false self sounds so bad, can we get rid of it? We cannot, because we need this false self to live on this earth. We need this false self to complete our lesson, to complete our mission. You think about when you're all scuba diver. In order to go into that ocean, what kind of gear you need to put on? You need to put on to the scuba gear clothing and all the gear, all the equipment, right? If you don't have the gear, have all the equipment, are you going to survive in the ocean? In the ocean, inside the ocean, for a period of time, you cannot. So the false self is like the scuba diving equipment, our vehicle, in order to live in this physical realm. Without this vehicle, we cannot live here. Without this vehicle, we won't be able to complete our lesson. Without this false self, we will not be able to experience this spiritual growth. So the programming of this false self is made out of our past karma, our family value, our culture, our education. This program is not a mistake. We all need this. But although this program is not perfect, it's not programmed good because I am programmed in Taiwan, so I am inherited with this Taiwan culture, and now I come to USA. But people in different countries, they are programmed into different way. People in India, they are programmed in different way because they are all their surrounding is to worship Lord Shiva, Vishnu, Ganesh. So we all are programmed in a different religious culture, in a different family culture, and different continent culture. But it's okay. All these are just part of the programming. But if we can see this is the program, it's okay. We need to be able to break the program, and hopefully we can rewrite our own program. With this program, it creates drama and conflict. In our life, we have, like I say, there's a lot of challenge. There's a challenge in our family harmony is difficult to achieve for some people, a satisfied career, or sometimes they have a disharmony in their work environment. So all this are learning opportunity for us. If we can pass this lesson, that means we can untie our knot. And when our tie is untied, then we can align ourselves to our true self. So here is the transitional verse. These three teachings are not sufficient. Thus, they must discipline to where they belong. I put they because in the earlier verse, I translate as people. So thus, people must discipline to where people belong. So where do they belong? Where do we belong? We belong to the universe. We belong to the source. Thus, we must discipline ourselves in order to go back to where we belong. The three teaching is referred to these three here, the three verses that we talk about. And this character here, one, it means teaching. It's the doctrine. It's the tool. I think Buddha used the analogy, the tool to go across the shore is using the raft. So all the teaching are supposed to be our raft. So once we get to the other side of the shore, we're supposed to get rid of the raft. One here, it means the teaching, the tool of guidance, tool of salvation. And here, why does it say it's not sufficient? Because in order to live a meaningful life, in order to live up to the purpose of life, in terms of Tao cultivation, these three is not enough. There's something that you must do. And this something that you must do is not within our program. That means we don't do that naturally because our false self allow us to be controlled by our five senses. Therefore, Laozi said we have to break through this program. We have to filter those knowledge. We have to filter what we hear. We have to filter what we see. We have to filter what we eat. So if it's not good knowledge, then we have to filter out. So in this case, we have to filter what is the true self and what is the false self. Sometimes we come to a point that we need to make some decision because we have a challenged life. It's better to make decision when we are in peace and quiet, because it's only in this time we are aligned with our true self. Remember, our true self can speak to us in a very quiet way. That's why sometimes it helps to meditate. Sometimes it helps to go to the mountain, to go to the beach, maybe to chant the sutra. Before we chant the sutra, maybe our mind is chaotic. But after we chant the sutra, our mind becomes peaceful, and then we can make decisions at that moment. So this kind of discipline, it's not within our program. We have to force ourselves to do that at first. At first, we have to force ourselves to do that. But once we get used to that rhythm, it's no longer a force. So in the beginning, it's your way. That is, we do that involuntary. After a period of time, it becomes wu wei. That means we do that naturally. So Tao cultivation at first is your way, which is involuntary. And in the end, hopefully we will come to the stage of 无为. On this word here, 所属, it means belong. Belong, I put parenthesis. Where do we belong to? In order to go to where we belong to, which is the source, the universe, we have to discipline ourselves. So this picture, it just illustrates this three is something superficial. It's part of the Tao cultivation, but it's still superficial. And the bottom one is what we need to do, what we need to focus on. It's maintaining from the source. Okay, so here is our last verse. Observe simplicity and embrace original nature. Lessen selfishness and reduce desire. Let me talk about this 4 characters here. The first one is observe. We can observe through our eyes, but we can also observe through our mind, that we call contemplate. We can observe through our mind, such as when we meditate. And su, it means simplicity, something plain, basic, something that's not being polluted, has not been decorated. And bao is embrace. Pu, which we already talked about in the earlier slide, that means it's a lumber that has not been processed, which signify our original true nature. And I do want to take you to the etymology of this word bao. As you can see here, there's a hen right here. Hen, and then this one, it looks like a wound and a baby is inside. So this word means wrap with arms, with love, care, and protection. So when we wrap with 2 arms, although here it's just 1 arm. So we wrap with arms, with love, care, and protection. How do you embrace a baby, or how do you hold a baby? You don't want a baby to drop. You don't want anything to hurt a baby. You want to protect it any way you can. So that's how we want to embrace, protect our true nature. We don't want our true nature to go polluted, to go contaminated. Now you say, wait a minute, how do people want to contaminate their true nature? You can by watching a lot of nonsense movie, by watching pornography. So there's a lot of non-genuine knowledge that will pollute your original nature or your true self. So we want to protect our true nature. Now this word is the etymology for su. As you can see here, this is the symbol of a hen. Because it's 2 hen, you can see 1 hen right here, the other hen is right here. And in the middle is just string. So on the top, it's the bundle of the thread. So this word, it means something raw. It's plain. It has not been decorated. It's the basic element. So this one refers to one's true nature, true essence, or Tao. Oh, by the way, throughout the chapter or throughout the presentation, I got this image through this website here. So let's look at this. Observe simplicity and embrace original nature, lessen selfishness, and reduce desire. This 2 words, it has the same meaning, although Laozi used a different character. So this word is lessen and reduce. And same thing for this one. It means the same. And I do want to talk about this character here. This character, it means individual, personal, private. It's about one person. The sentence does not talk about selfishness. It just talks about lessen individual. But I think in order to make the sentence more complete with its annotation, that's why I put selfishness. But the true translation should be lessen individual's perspective. Okay, so when we talk about lessen individual's perspective, that means we want to lessen our false self, because the characteristic of the false self, everything is about me, I. So when I say, my name is Joanna, I live in Riverside, I like to study Tao Te Ching, I have a family of 4, I live on a farm. Every sentence that I start, is start from I. So false self has this characteristic of I. So when I say I'm separating myself with the universe. So I become myself, I become isolated. So the problem of this society is that there's so many I, because everybody are programmed to interpret from their own false self. Everybody have their own I. That's why there's so much conflict, so much discrimination, judgment, greed, anger, aversion. Why am I angry at you? Because this is what I think and you are different than me, so I am angry at you. Because of the concept or the perspective false self. I'll say the majority of the human beings on earth are living in this perspective. Unfortunately, this is how we are programmed this way. So the purpose of the sharing session of the Tao Te Ching, the purpose of Tao cultivation is to help us to understand, although we have this body of I, although we have this perspective of false self, although we are programmed to be this false self, but we have to break through this program, then we can see there is a true self behind our false self. And when we do that, we can align our true self with the universe. And this is the point where we can untangle our knot. Because when we start to dealing with our daily life, with our true self, then life will become much easier. So I want you to think about, in the past, there will be some grudges, some challenge that you have, and probably you deal with those challenge, those difficulty with your false self. But now you think about it, if you can deal with it with your true self, then would your life be much easier? I'm not saying that in our life we will have much easier life, but the problem solving skill will become much easier because we are aligned with our true self. And when we are aligned with our true self, we are aligned with Tao, we are aligned with the wisdom, the energy from the universe, and we will become more wise. And that's how we can simplify our life, untangle our knots. Oh, okay. One more thing here. I forgot to mention. Here, Laozi does mention that lessen selfishness. Laozi did not mention about abandon or discontinue, because we still have this false self. So discontinue and discard is not used on selfishness and desire. We can still have selfishness and we can still have desire. Just make it less on this and reduce on this. But in terms of the sagehood and knowledge, we want to abandon and discard. And this line says, our body are useful vessel for the true self to further develop. Yeah. So after our session today, we will still encounter our life challenge, but I want you to put more emphasis on our true self. We cannot get rid of our false self because we are still in this physical realm. We need a false self. We put less emphasis on the false self and put more emphasis on the true self. So that's the end of my sharing on chapter 19. On the next session will be chapter 20. The title will be The Challenge of Being Different. If mistakes were made or said during today's sharing, I ask the forgiveness from the Heavenly Mother, Buddha Maitreya, 鞠躬 Buddha, Patriarchs, 师尊师母, Grand Master, and Senior Master Li and Junior Master Li. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you.